No, what's going on is that the United States already decided now we're going to be the sole superpower of the world, and Russia is going to basically just have to be cut down to size, but we're certainly not going to take any heroic measures to, sustain Russia as a viable potential threat to us. And so Russia's an enemy still. Or a threat. It's a competitor.
First of all, this was the first Bush administration still?
This was the end of the Bush administration, and then the same thing happened in the first year of the Clinton administration.
What was the source of resistance ideological? I mean, you wouldn't expect a ton of ideological continuity between the two. I mean, although, of course, the U.S. foreign policy establishment tends to be a more or less constant thing. But
it is a deep thing. This is a truth. It's a deep thing. It's not dependent so much on who's president. In fact, you sometimes wonder if the presidents really have much role in it at all.
But is this fiscal conservatism?
No.
What is going on?
No, what's going on is that the United States already decided now we're going to be the sole superpower of the world. And Russia is going to basically just have to be cut down to size, but we're certainly not going to take any heroic measures to, sustain Russia as a viable potential threat to us. And so Russia's an enemy still, or a threat. It's a competitor.
Don't you think if you had asked the first George Bush, if you had asked Bill Clinton, they would have said, and I think meant it, we want to integrate Russia into the West. I mean, it was still the Soviet Union.
Yes, that's
for a while.
correct.
Then it became
we want to integrate them into a U.S.-led system.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
But it seems to me to fail to appreciate the delicacy of the challenge actually entailed in integrating Russia into the West is really malpractice. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's like, it was a big challenge. I mean, it's like this, you're taking a command economy, a formerly totalitarian system. You've got all these kind of, you might say, psychological issues. They're adjusting to suddenly not being considered one of the world's two superpowers. You would ideally like them to move in a democratic direction. I don't think that's truly a prerequisite for world peace, as some people do, but you like it. I mean, there's a lot going on there. It just seems to me hard to imagine that they didn't say, we need some task forces. We need the world's greatest minds figuring out how we're going to accomplish this. They just thought it will happen naturally.
And they didn't. They didn't, period. The idea started in 1992 under Bush 1 with Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Cheney, that this is now the time for the U.S. to lead the world, to be the global hegemon. That was the idea. For Clinton, the idea was, I don't know what. Presidents don't understand much anyway in the first year or two of their administrations, and Clinton was certainly like that. But they said no heroics. It's domestic politics anyway, no heroics. And so, no, nothing of a big, ambitious scale was done. That was what I believed in because I knew enough of history I knew a lot of history, I have to say, of the end of World War I and the disasters that ensued, and the end of World War II and the constructive approach that had ensued. And I wanted this to be a constructive approach, but the U.S. already had decided in 1992, this is going to be a U.S.-led world. We're going to start expanding NATO. Russia is, going to be a bit player. We just have to make sure the nukes don't go off. But other than that, we don't have to pay too much attention. And of course, they had no conception of how China was going to rise during this period. But what I would say in brief is that from 1992 until today, the U.S. grand strategy has been to be the top dog with no rival. And of course, it's a ridiculous idea compared to the idea of a decent world that cooperates and that tries to overcome poverty and that faces climate change and so forth. The U.S. grand strategy is not about ending climate change. It's not about economic development. It's not about ending poverty. It's not about peace. The U.S. grand strategy is that the United States needs to be the predominant country in the world, period. And we have two rivals in this vision. One is the big one, China, and the other one is what they think of as a kind of sideshow, but it's not quite a sideshow. It's 11 time zones, and it's a country with 1,700 deployed nuclear weapons, and we're at war with it. That's Russia. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. view is, no, this is the U.S. world. And that is in both parties. In the Republican Party, it was the Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz world. In the Democratic Party, it's been the Democratic Party neocons. By the way, Victoria Nuland, our Undersecretary of State, Blinken, Jake Sullivan, and Biden. They've been part of that all along.
Are you saying they all deserve the label? This is a technical issue, neocon, or you're just saying that it's more or less the same foreign policy, whatever you call it?
A little bit of both, but when I say it, people are shocked. Jeff, what are you talking about? How could you call Biden a neocon? A congressman just basically took my head off a little bit for saying that. But the fact of the matter is, look, Biden, Nuland, and Sullivan were part of the overthrow of the Ukrainian president in 2014 that really started this war in its violent phase. So yes, they've been part of the idea that what's really at stake is a U.S.-led world. For me, it doesn't compute. What's really at stake, in my view, is a cooperative world operating under the UN Charter and taking steps to end poverty and fight climate change and other environmental disasters. But it's a very different view. Basically, most of Washington is organized around the U.S. must lead view. And it's out of date. It's anachronistic. It was wrong in 1992. It's wildly out of date today because it's no longer even based on a U.S. economic or technological predominance, given China's rise. So it gets more and more dangerous every day because it's completely out of sync with ground reality.